Lisa Carter walked into the huge meeting room on Nexus Prime. The room was bigger than most buildings on Earth. Hundreds of alien beings sat in their special chairs, all different shapes and sizes. Some looked like walking crystals. Others had too many arms or eyes that glowed in the dark. Lisa was the only human in the room. She took her seat in the back corner. The other aliens barely looked at her. They never did. For 30 years, humans had been part of the Galactic Council, but they were always treated like children who got lucky. "The human speaks now," announced the tall blue alien who ran the meeting. His voice sounded bored. Lisa stood up. "Thank you, Council Leader Zix. I want to talk about the missing ships in Sector 7. Several aliens made sounds that might have been laughing. The crystal beings made a noise like wind chimes in a storm. "Little human," said a Vorthok, with a voice like breaking glass, "your people cannot understand space travel. You only learned to fly between stars 50 years ago. We have been doing this for thousands of years." Lisa felt her face get hot, but she kept talking. "Our scouts found wreckage, ship parts that don't match any known technology, and the metal looks ... eaten." More alien sounds filled the room. This time they were definitely laughing. Eaten metal. The blue leader shook his head. "Humans see monsters in every shadow. This is why your world is called a world. You think everything wants to kill you." Lisa sat down. She had tried to warn them before about strange things happening in deep space. They never listened. To them, humans were just lucky animals from a dangerous planet. Far away from the meeting, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship. The ship was called the Defiance, and it was one of only 12 ships that humans had in space. Compared to the huge fleets of other species, it was nothing. "Captain," said his second officer, "we're getting close to the outer rim." Jake nodded. The outer rim was where nobody wanted to go. It was far from the safe, civilized worlds. Only, humans were dumb enough, or brave enough to patrol out there. At least, that's what the other species said. "Sir," called out Ben Craig from his station, "I'm picking up something weird on sensors." Jake walked over to look. On the screen, he could see a small space station, but something was wrong with it. "It's not moving," Ben said. "No power, no life signs. But it was working fine last week." "Take us closer," Jake ordered. As they got near the station, they could see it better. The metal walls had holes in them. Big, round holes that looked like something had taken bites out of the station. "Captain," whispered his communications officer, "I'm getting a recording. It's from 3 days ago. Play it." The voice that came through the speakers was terrified. It spoke in the clicking language of the Corvan people. Jake's computer translated the words. "Something is coming. It eats everything. It ate our power core. It ate our weapons. It's eating the walls. By the stars, it's eating the walls. We tried to run, but it moves too fast. If anyone hears this, stay away from the recording cutoff." Jake stared at the screen. The station was completely dead. Whatever had attacked it was gone now. But it had left behind something that made his skin crawl. The holes in the station walls weren't random. They formed a pattern, like something had been feeding in an organized way. "Sir," Ben said quietly, "should we report this to the council?" Jake thought about Lisa Carter sitting in that big room, trying to get the aliens to listen. "Yes, send everything to Ambassador Carter. Maybe this time they'll pay attention." But Jake had a bad feeling they wouldn't. On Earth, Admiral Susan Blake sat in her office looking at reports from deep space. She commanded all of humanity's space forces, which wasn't saying much. 12 ships and a few thousand people. Most other species had millions of ships and crews. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Admiral, we have new intel from the scout ships." Susan looked at the data on her screen. 3 more colonies had gone dark in the past month. All of them in the outer rim. All of them just ... empty. "What do the other species say about this?" she asked. They say it's pirates or equipment failures. Nothing to worry about. Susan shook her head. The other species thought humans worried too much. They said humans saw danger everywhere because Earth was such a dangerous planet. Maybe they were right. Maybe humans did think differently because they grew up on a world where everything tried to kill them. But Susan had been a soldier for 40 years. She knew the difference between normal danger and something else, something worse. She opened a communication channel to the Galactic Council. It would take hours for her message to reach them, but she had to try. "This is Admiral Blake of Earth Defense Forces. We are seeing unusual activity in the Outer Rim, entire colonies disappearing. I recommend immediate investigation by Council forces." She sent the message and waited. 3 days later, she got a reply from a minor council official. "Thank you for your concern. The council has reviewed your data. We believe these incidents are within normal parameters for frontier regions. No action is required at this time." Susan crumpled the message and threw it away. Normal parameters, right? She called her staff together. "I want all our ships to increase patrols in the Outer Rim, double the scout missions, and start working on new ship designs. I have a feeling we're going to need them." "What kind of designs, Admiral?" asked her chief engineer. "The kind that can fight something we've never seen before." The engineer looked confused, but Susan didn't explain. She couldn't. She just knew that something was coming. Something that would make the other species wish they had listened to the humans from the dangerous little planet called Earth. In the deep darkness between stars, something ancient stirred. It had been sleeping for 1,000,000 years, waiting for the galaxy to grow fat and comfortable again. Now it was hungry, and there were so many civilized worlds to feed on, it began to move toward the light. 3 months passed since Jake Morrison found the empty station. During that time, more strange reports came from the Outer Rim. Ships found drifting with no crew, colonies that stopped answering calls, space stations with bite marks in their metal walls. The Galactic Council still said it was nothing important. Then everything changed. Jake was eating breakfast on the Defiance when his communications officer ran onto the bridge. Her face was white with fear. "Captain, you need to hear this," she said. "It's from the Vorthok home system." Jake put down his coffee and listened to the recording. The voice was speaking in the crystal language of the Vorthok people. Even through the translation, Jake could hear the terror. "This is Crystal Singer Vex of Kalani Br. Something is attacking our world. It came from space. It's eating our cities. It's eating our people. The crystal cores that hold our minds are going dark. We tried to fight, but our weapons do nothing. By the eternal light, it's coming. For the main hive. If anyone receives this..." The recording turned to screaming, then silence. Jake stared at the communication device. Bright 7 was a major Vorthok colony, home to 50 million crystal beings, and now it was gone. "Sir," his navigation officer said, "we're the closest ship to their system." Jake thought fast. "Send a message to the council. Request permission to investigate." The reply came back in 2 hours. Request denied. Corvin Battle Group 7 is being sent to investigate. Human vessel will maintain current patrol route. Jake wanted to punch something. A whole world was dead, and they wouldn't let him help because he was human. On the research station called Harmony, Dr. Kevin Hayes was having his own problems. The station was supposed to be a place where all species worked together to study the galaxy, but Kevin was learning that working together meant humans did the boring jobs, while other species took credit for the discoveries. Kevin had been studying old records for months, ancient files from civilizations that died out long ago. Most of the other scientists thought it was a waste of time, but Kevin had found something interesting. He was reading a file that was over 1,000,000 years old when Dr. Kixnell walked into his lab. Kixnell was a Zephyrian, part of a species that shared a group mind. All Zephyrians could talk to each other with their thoughts across the galaxy. Human Kevin, Kixnell said in his buzzing voice, why do you study dead civilizations? Living. Science is more important. Kevin looked up from his computer. These aren't just dead civilizations. Look at this. He showed Kixnell the ancient file. It told the story of something called the Devourers, creatures that came from the dark between stars and ate entire worlds. This is fiction, Kixnell said. Ancient peoples made up stories to explain things they didn't understand. But look at the details, Kevin said. The way they describe the attacks. It matches what's been happening in the Outer Rim. Kixnell made a sound like static. In culture. That meant, he thought Kevin was being stupid. Humans see patterns where none exist, Kixnell said. This is why your species was so slow to develop space travel. You waste time on fantasies. Kevin wanted to argue, but Kixnell had already left. Kevin looked back at his screen. The ancient files said the Devourers had been beaten before, but it took a special kind of thinking to defeat them. The kind of thinking that most civilized species had evolved past. The kind of thinking that humans still had. On Earth, Lieutenant Amy Foster was flying through a thunderstorm. Her fighter plane shook and bucked as lightning flashed around her. Most pilots would have turned back. Amy pushed her engines harder. Control, this is Falcon 1, she said into her radio. Weather conditions are perfect for training. The voice from the control tower sounded worried. Falcon 1, that storm could tear your plane apart. Amy laughed. Sir, if I can't fly through a little storm, how am I supposed to fight in space? She dove toward the ocean, pulling up just before hitting the waves. Her plane screamed through the air at impossible speeds. Behind her, 3 other fighters tried to keep up. They were all part of Amy's squadron, the best pilots Earth had. What made them the best wasn't just skill. It was the fact that they had grown up on Earth, a planet where everything tried to kill you. Storms that could level cities. Earthquakes that split the ground open. Volcanoes that blocked out the sun. Other species came from nice, safe worlds. Worlds with perfect weather and no natural disasters. Their pilots were good, but they flew like machines. They followed the rules and did everything by the book. Human pilots flew with their hearts. They made decisions based on feelings and instincts. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. Amy's squadron had beaten alien pilots in training exercises many times. The aliens always said it was because humans were too crazy to predict. Amy thought that was the nicest thing anyone had ever said about her species. Far away, in the Zephyrian Empire, something terrible was happening. The Zephyrians were proud of their group mind, billions of beings all connected by thought. They could share knowledge instantly across the galaxy. It made them smarter than any individual species. But now, that connection was breaking. World after world, the Zephyrian hive mind was going silent. Not destroyed. Not conquered. Just ... empty. Like someone had reached into their shared thoughts and eaten them. The remaining Zephyrians sent scout ships to the dead worlds. What they found made no sense. The planets were still there. The cities were still standing. But every Zephyrian was gone. Not dead. Gone, like they had never existed. The scouts found no bodies, no signs of fighting, just empty buildings, and a strange, hungry feeling in the air. Back on Harmony Station, Dr. Kevin Hayes felt the fear through the station's systems. The Zephyrian researchers had all stopped working. They stood perfectly still, listening to something only they could hear. What's wrong? Kevin asked one of them. The silence, the Zephyrian whispered. Our brothers on the rim worlds have gone silent. Not dead. Silent. There is something in the dark that eats thoughts. Kevin felt cold. He ran back to his lab and pulled up the ancient files again. There it was, written in languages dead for 1,000,000 years. The Devourers didn't just eat matter and energy. They ate consciousness itself. They consumed the very idea of existence. And they were coming back. Kevin sent a message to Earth immediately. Admiral Blake needed to know what they were really facing. But even as he sent the message, he wondered if it would matter. The ancient files said only one kind of thinking could defeat the Devaras. Chaotic, unpredictable, emotional thinking. The kind that civilized species had evolved past. The kind that only humans still had. In the command center of the Corvan Federation, military leaders watched their greatest battle fleet disappear. Battle Group 7 had found the dead world. They had sent back one message. By the warrior's oath. What is this thing? Then nothing. The entire fleet, gone without a trace. The Corvan were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Their ships were the strongest. Their weapons were the most powerful. And something had made them vanish like smoke. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Corvan leaders felt afraid. In the darkness between stars, ancient hunger stirred and grew stronger. The feast had begun. The Galactic Council was in chaos. Half the galaxy's major civilizations had gone silent in just 2 months. The mighty Vorthok Empire was down to 3 colony worlds. The Zephyrian hive mind was a shadow of its former self. The Corvan Federation had lost their entire home fleet. Lisa Carter sat in the emergency session and watched alien leaders panic. Species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years were now begging for help from anyone who would listen. "We must evacuate the core worlds," said Council Leader Zix. His blue skin had turned almost white with fear. "Whatever this threat is, we cannot fight it." "Evacuation to where?" asked a Vorthok crystal singer. Her voice sounded like broken glass. "It has consumed everything in its path. There is nowhere to run." Lisa stood up. For once, the other aliens didn't ignore her. They were too scared to care about their pride. "My people have been studying this threat," Lisa said. "We believe we know what you're facing." Zix made a sound of disbelief. "Your people? Humans have been in space for 50 years. We have been fighting wars among the stars for millennia. And yet you're all losing," Lisa said simply. "Maybe it's time to listen to someone new." The room went quiet. Lisa pulled up the data that Dr. Kevin Hayes had sent from Harmony Station. "These are called the Devourers," she said. "They attacked the galaxy once before, over 1,000,000 years ago. Every advanced civilization fought them. Every advanced civilization lost." She showed them the ancient records, pictures of dead worlds, stories of entire species vanishing overnight, accounts of creatures that could eat thoughts and consciousness itself. "How were they stopped?" asked a Corvan general. Lisa looked at the data. By a species that thought differently. A species that was chaotic and unpredictable. A species from a dangerous world that taught them to survive impossible odds. She didn't need to say it. Everyone in the room understood. The species that had defeated the Devourers before was humanity's ancestors. The people of ancient Earth. "Impossible," Zix said. "Humans are a young species." "You could not have, not us," Lisa interrupted. "Our predecessors, but we still carry their genes. We still think the way they did." Captain Jake Morrison was disobeying orders again. The Council had told all human ships to stay away from the affected areas. But Jake couldn't sit back and watch the galaxy burn. He had taken the Defiance to a recently attacked Vorthok world. What he found there made his stomach turn. The beautiful crystal cities were still standing, but they were empty. Worse than empty, they felt hungry. "Captain," said Ben Craig from his sensor station, "I'm reading something weird in the city ruins." Jake looked at the data. "What am I looking at?" "Energy patterns," Ben said, "but not normal energy. It's like the energy is flowing backward." Jake frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "No, sir, it doesn't. But look at this." Ben showed him a map of the destroyed city. The energy flows form a pattern. like something was feeding in an organized way. Jake studied the pattern. It looked random at first, but then he saw it. The feeding pattern had weak spots, places where the energy flow was uneven. "Ben, you're a genius," Jake said. "Send this data to Earth immediately. Admiral Blake needs to see this." On Earth, Admiral Blake was getting reports from across the galaxy. The situation was getting worse by the day. Entire sectors were going dark. Refugee ships were fleeing toward human space, begging for protection. The irony wasn't lost on her. For 30 years, the galaxy had treated humans like primitive savages. Now, they wanted humans to save them. Her assistant brought her the data from Jake Morrison's mission. Blake studied the patterns on her screen. She had been a soldier long enough to recognize weak points when she saw them. "Get me our best tactical minds," she said, "and contact Dr. Hayes on Harmony Station. I want to know everything about these Devourers." Commander Rita Walsh was leading a covert mission into Devourer territory. Her ship, the Silent Runner, was specially designed for stealth. She had volunteered for the mission because someone had to gather intelligence on the enemy. What she found was worse than anyone had imagined. The Devourers weren't just destroying civilizations, they were learning from them. Each species they consumed made them smarter and stronger. They had absorbed the military tactics of the Corvin, the collective intelligence of the Zephyrians, the advanced technology of the Vorthok. "Captain," her science officer whispered, "I'm detecting something else. The Devourers aren't random in their attacks. They're moving in a specific pattern." Rita looked at the star map on her screen. The Devourers had consumed worlds in a spiral pattern, moving from the galaxy's edge toward the center. And at the center of their spiral was one particular area of space, human space. "They're not just randomly feeding," Rita realized. "They're herding the survivors toward us." But why? What was special about humans that made the Devourers want to face them directly? Dr. Kevin Hayes thought he knew the answer. He had been studying the ancient records, day and night, looking for any clue about how the Devourers had been defeated before. He found it in a text, so old that most of the words had been forgotten. But what he could translate painted a terrifying picture. The Devourers fed on order, unpredictable thoughts and logical minds. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy had evolved toward greater logic and efficiency. They had become perfect food for the Devourers. But Earth's ancestors had been different. They had lived on a world that tried to kill them every day. They had never had the luxury of pure logic. They had to rely on instinct, emotion, and pure stubborn refusal to give up. That chaotic thinking was like poison to the Devourers. They couldn't digest it, they couldn't predict it, and when they tried to feed on it, it made them sick. Kevin sent his findings to Admiral Blake, on Earth, along with his translation of the ancient weapon that had driven the Devourers away. The weapon wasn't a machine or a bomb. It was a way of thinking, a mental state that humans could create, but other species couldn't. The ancients had called it the beautiful chaos of a desperate mind. Back on Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council was making a decision that went against everything they believed. They were going to ask the primitive humans from the dangerous little planet to lead the defense of the galaxy. Lisa Carter listened to their offer with a straight face. They were promising humans full membership in the council, advanced technology, respect as equals. "What do you want in return?" Zix asked. Lisa smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "We want command of the combined fleet, complete tactical control, and we want everyone to follow our orders without question." The aliens looked shocked. The idea of taking orders from humans was almost unthinkable. "Your orders," a Corvin general growled. "We have been fighting wars for longer than your species has existed, and yet you're all losing," Lisa pointed out again. "Your advanced tactics and logical strategies are exactly what the Devourers expect. We need to do something they can't predict." Zix looked around the room at the other leaders. They were desperate enough to try anything. "Very well," he said. "Humanity will lead the defense. May the stars help us all." Admiral Blake received the news with mixed feelings. Humanity had finally gotten the respect they deserved, but it had come at the cost of half the galaxy. She called her staff together. "Ladies and gentlemen, we just got promoted from galactic jokes to galactic saviors. Start preparing every ship we have, and contact Captain Morrison. I'm promoting him to Admiral. We're going to need our best people for this." "What's our strategy, Admiral?" asked her tactical officer. Blake looked at the star charts showing the Devourers advance. They would reach Earth in less than a month. "We're going to do what humans do best," she said. "We're going to survive." In the darkness of space, the Devourers sensed the change. The prey was organizing. The logical, orderly minds were preparing their defenses. But there was something else. Something chaotic and unpredictable stirring in the small system that held the blue-green world. For the first time in a million years, the Devourers felt something they had forgotten existed. They felt uncertain. The surviving members of the Galactic Council arrived at Earth like refugees running from a fire. Their massive ships filled Earth's orbit, dwarfing humanity's small fleet. But for the first time in galactic history, the aliens were coming too. Humans for protection. Admiral Blake stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Resilience, and watched the alien vessels take defensive positions. Ships that had once looked down on human technology were now depending on human strategy to survive. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "Council Leader Zix is requesting permission to enter Earth's atmosphere. He wants to set up an emergency government base." Blake almost laughed. "Tell him he's welcome to try. But warn him about the hurricanes in the southern hemisphere and the earthquakes on the western continent. And make sure he knows about the volcanoes." The aliens had never understood why humans called Earth a world. They were about to learn. Captain Jake Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, was studying battle plans with his tactical team. The Devourers would reach Earth's solar system in 2 weeks. When they arrived, humanity would have to do something no other species had managed. They would have to win. "Sir," Ben Craig said, "I've been analyzing the Devourer attack patterns. They always start the same way. Logical formations, predictable assault vectors. That's how they beat everyone else," Jake said. "Other species respond with logical counterattacks, which is exactly what the Devourers expect. So what do we do differently?" Jake grinned. It was the kind of grin that made smart people nervous. "We do something so stupid that it just might work." He pulled up a holographic display of Earth's solar system. "Look at this. Every military academy in the galaxy teaches the same thing. You defend from strong positions. You use your advantages. You minimize risks." He pointed to various locations around the system. "We're going to do the opposite. We're going to split our forces. We're going to abandon our strong positions. We're going to take crazy risks that no sane military commander would ever consider." Ben stared at the plan. "Sir, this strategy violates every principle of space combat. It's insane." "Exactly," Jake said. "The Devourers have consumed the memories of every great military mind in the galaxy. They know every strategy, every tactic, every brilliant military move ever made. But they don't know how to fight against pure, beautiful insanity." Dr. Kevin Hayes had left Harmony Station and come to Earth. He was working with Admiral Blake's scientists to understand the weapon their ancestors had used against the Devourers. What they found was both simple and terrifying. "It's not a physical weapon," Kevin explained to the gathered officers. "It's a mental state. The ancient texts call it chaos consciousness. It's a way of thinking that's completely unpredictable." "How do we create this chaos consciousness?" Admiral Blake asked. Kevin looked uncomfortable. "By embracing everything that other species think makes us primitive. Emotional decision-making, instinctive reactions, fighting based on feelings instead of logic. That sounds like a recipe for disaster, one of the alien advisors said. Maybe, Kevin replied, but it's also the only thing that's ever worked against the Deathworlders. Lieutenant Amy Foster was training her fighter squadron in Earth's most dangerous environments. Today they were flying through the asteroid belt while solar flares disrupted their instruments. Control. Visibility is 0, reported one of her pilots. Instruments are fried. How are we supposed to fly in this? Feel your way through it, Amy replied calmly. She was diving between asteroids at insane speeds, trusting her instincts to keep her alive. Don't think, just react. Her squadron followed her lead, flying patterns that should have gotten them all killed. Instead, they danced through the asteroids like they were born in space. Other species would have said it was impossible. Amy called it Tuesday. You know, she said to her wingman, I'm starting to understand why the aliens think we're crazy. Because we are crazy, he replied. That's what makes us good at this. Commander Rita Walsh was leading preparation of humanity's secret weapon. Hidden throughout Earth's solar system were chaos generators, ancient devices that Dr. Hayes had found references to in the old texts. Human engineers had been working around the clock to restore them. What exactly do these things do? Asked her chief engineer. According to the ancient records, they amplify chaotic thought patterns, Rita explained. When we activate them during battle, they'll broadcast human unpredictability on a massive scale. The engineer looked skeptical. That's our secret weapon, broadcasting the fact that we're unpredictable. Trust me, Rita said, when you're fighting an enemy that depends on being able to predict their opponents, unpredictability becomes the most powerful weapon in the universe. The alien refugees on Earth were having a hard time adjusting to life on a death world. Council leader Zix had set up his headquarters in what humans assured him was a safe location. Then an earthquake knocked over half his equipment. How do you live on this planet? He asked Admiral Blake during their daily briefing. Carefully, Blake replied, and with a healthy respect for the fact that our world is trying to kill us every day. This explains much about human psychology, Zix muttered. Actually, it does, Blake agreed. We grew up on a planet where you can't predict what's going to try to kill you next. It taught us to adapt fast and think on our feet. She pointed to the tactical displays showing the approaching devourers. Other species grew up on nice, safe worlds. They learned to think in straight lines. We learned to think in zigzags. Admiral Morrison was putting the finishing touches on humanity's battle plan. It was so unconventional that several alien military advisors had called it militarily impossible. The first wave will attack from directly in front, Jake explained to his senior staff, which is exactly what they'll expect. But instead of a standard formation, we'll attack in a pattern based on Amy Foster's storm-flying techniques. He showed them the formation on a holographic display. It looked like chaos. Ships moving in seemingly random directions, with no apparent coordination. The second wave will attack from behind, he continued. Not behind the enemy, which would make sense. Behind our own first wave, we'll literally be shooting past our own ships. Sir, one of his officers said carefully, that's incredibly dangerous. Dangerous and stupid, Jake agreed, which is why it might work. The Devourers will analyze our first wave and prepare counters based on logical tactical thinking. They won't be ready for our second wave to come from the direction that makes no sense. The plan got even crazier from there. Ships would break formation for no reason. Weapons would be fired at random intervals. Some ships would retreat when they should advance, and advance when they should retreat. It was the kind of plan that would get you thrown out of any military academy in the galaxy. Which was exactly why Jake thought it would work. Dr. Hayes made one final discovery in the ancient texts. The original defenders of the galaxy hadn't just used chaos consciousness as a weapon. They had used their entire world as part of the battle. Earth isn't just our home, he told Admiral Blake. It's our greatest tactical advantage. The Devourers come from the empty space between stars. They're not used to fighting near planets with unstable weather, gravitational anomalies, and magnetic storms. Blake smiled. So we make them fight on our terms. Exactly. We draw them into Earth's atmosphere, into our storms and gravitational fields. We turn our own death world into a weapon. 2 days before the Devourers were scheduled to arrive, Admiral Blake addressed the combined human and alien fleets. For 30 years, you've called us primitive, she said to the aliens. You've said we're too emotional, too unpredictable, too chaotic to be trusted with important decisions. She paused and looked around at the assembled crews. Today, you're going to find out why being primitive, emotional, and chaotic is exactly what this galaxy needs. Lieutenant Amy Foster was performing final checks on her fighter when her ground crew chief approached her. Lieutenant, the alien pilots are asking how they should fly in the upcoming battle, he said. Amy thought about it. Tell them to forget everything they learned in flight school. Tell them to stop thinking and start feeling. And tell them to remember that sometimes the only way to win is to be just crazy enough to try something that shouldn't work. In the darkness beyond Pluto, sensors detected the first signs of the approaching Devourers. They were coming in the same formation they had used to destroy every other civilization. Logical, predictable, unstoppable. But they had never faced an enemy that had grown up fighting the universe itself. They had never encountered a species that thought the best plan was often the craziest plan. They had never fought humans. Admiral Blake stood on the bridge of the Resilience and watched the enemy approach. For the first time in galactic history, the fate of all civilized life rested in the hands of the species everyone had called too primitive to matter. All ships, she said into her communicator. This is Admiral Blake. Today we show the galaxy why they call us Deathworlders, and we show the Devourers why that's the scariest thing they've ever heard. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin. The Devourers entered Earth's solar system like a dark tide. Their ships were massive, organic-looking things that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved in perfect formation, just as they had when destroying every other civilization in the galaxy. Admiral Blake watched them approach on her screens. All ships, remember the plan. When I give the signal, we go completely crazy. The Devourers spread out in their standard attack formation. They had done this 1,000 times before. First, they would analyze the enemy's defenses. Then they would adapt their tactics to counter any logical response. Finally, they would consume everything. But as they scanned the human fleet, something felt wrong. The ships were arranged in no pattern they could recognize. Some were clustered together in tight groups. Others hung alone in empty space. A few were actually pointing in the wrong direction. Now, Admiral Blake said quietly, the human fleet erupted into motion. But instead of the organized charge the Devourers expected, the ships moved like a swarm of angry bees. There was no formation, no coordination, no logical plan. Admiral Morrison led the first wave in the Defiance. He was flying directly at the largest Devourer ship, which was exactly what any sane military commander would do. But instead of attacking it, he suddenly veered off and started shooting at a smaller ship that wasn't even threatening him. Defiance, what are you doing? Called another captain. I have no idea, Jake replied honestly. It just feels right. The Devourers tried to analyze the human attack pattern, but every time they thought they understood it, the humans did something different. Ships that should have been working together split apart for no reason. Weapons fired at targets that made no tactical sense. Some human ships even seemed to be running away from the battle, only to circle back and attack from impossible angles. Lieutenant Amy Foster was leading her fighter squadron through the chaos. She dove through the middle of the battle, dodging fire from both sides. Her pilots followed her in a weaving pattern that looked like they were dancing rather than fighting. "Amy, where are we going?" one of her pilots asked. "Wherever feels right," she replied. She was following her instincts, the same instincts that had kept her alive, flying through Earth's storms. "Don't think about it. Just fly." Her squadron swept past a devourer ship and unleashed their weapons. But instead of targeting the obvious weak points, they fired at random sections of the hull. Somehow, their chaotic attack pattern found gaps in the enemy's defenses that logical targeting would have missed. Dr. Kevin Hayes was monitoring the battle from Earth's surface. The chaos generators hidden throughout the solar system were working perfectly. They were broadcasting human unpredictability on a scale the Devourers had never encountered. "It's working," he told Admiral Blake over the communicator. "The Devourers are trying to adapt to our tactics, but they can't. Every time they think they've figured us out, we do something completely different." The Devourers were feeling something they hadn't experienced in a million years. Confusion. Every species they had ever fought followed predictable patterns. Even when those species tried to be creative, they were still thinking in logical ways. But humans weren't thinking logically at all. They were fighting with their emotions, their instincts, their pure, stubborn refusal to give up. It was like trying to catch smoke with their tentacles. Commander Rita Walsh was leading a boarding party onto a devourer ship. Her team was using tactics that would have gotten them all killed against any normal enemy. They split up when they should have stayed together. They attacked the strongest points instead of looking for weak ones. They even turned their backs on the enemy to help wounded teammates. It shouldn't have worked. But the Devourers couldn't predict what humans would do when they stopped trying to be logical. Rita's team fought their way to the ship's core, not through superior firepower, but through sheer unpredictability. "Plant the charges," Rita ordered. Her demolition expert looked at the alien technology surrounding them. "Ma'am, I don't know how this thing works. I'm just going to put explosives everywhere and hope for the best." "Perfect," Rita said. "That's exactly the kind of plan they'll never see coming." The battle was turning into something no military academy had ever taught. Human ships were ramming enemy vessels when they should have been retreating. Fighters were using their own ships as weapons. Some captains were making decisions by flipping coins. And somehow, it was working. Admiral Morrison had just done something so crazy that even he wasn't sure why he'd done it. He had positioned the Defiance between two enemy ships and started firing in both directions at once. "Sir," Ben Craig said from his station, "this is tactically insane." "I know," Jake replied. "Isn't it beautiful?" The two Devourer ships, expecting logical behavior, had moved to attack the Defiance from opposite sides. But Jake's random firing pattern had damaged both of them in ways they hadn't anticipated. They collided with each other, trying to avoid his unpredictable maneuvers. Earth itself was becoming part of the battle. Admiral Blake had drawn the Devourers into the planet's atmosphere, where Earth's chaotic weather patterns became a weapon. Lightning storms interfered with the enemy's sensors. Gravitational anomalies threw their ships off course. Hurricane-force winds that humans were used to flying in made the Devourers' precise movements impossible. "This is Lieutenant Foster," Amy called over the radio. "I'm leading the enemy through the storm system over the Pacific. They can't handle the turbulence." She was right. The Devourers, used to the empty perfection of space, couldn't adapt to Earth's violent weather. Their ships were being battered by winds and lightning, while Amy's squadron danced through the storm like they were born in it. The tide of battle was turning. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers were losing, not because they faced superior weapons or tactics, but because they faced something they couldn't understand or predict. Commander Walsh's demolition expert had planted his random explosives throughout the Devourer ship's core. When they detonated, the ship died in a way that made no scientific sense. But sometimes, the universe rewarded those who were brave enough to try something impossible. Admiral Blake watched the battle from the Resilience. and realized they were actually winning. The Devourers were retreating, their perfect formations broken by humanity's beautiful chaos. All ships, she announced, press the attack. Show them what Deathworlders can do when they're properly motivated. The human fleet surged forward, no longer following any plan except the plan to never give up. They chased the retreating Devourers across the solar system, their attacks growing more unpredictable with every passing moment. Dr. Hayes watched from Earth as the chaos generators reached maximum output. The entire solar system was flooded with the chaotic energy of human thought. The Devourers couldn't process it. It was like poison to their ordered minds. Admiral Morrison led the final charge against the Devourer command ship. As he approached it, he made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of trying to destroy it, he opened a communication channel. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the human ship Defiance," he said. "You came here thinking you'd found another civilized species to consume. You were wrong. We're not civilized. We're survivors from a death world that's been trying to kill us since we first learned to walk." The Devourer command ship paused in its retreat. "You want to know why you can't beat us?" Jake continued. "It's because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten, too stubborn to give up, too crazy to fight the way you expect." He aimed his weapons at the command ship. "This is how fight. We don't follow the rules because we never learned them. We don't think logically because logic won't save you when a volcano explodes or a hurricane hits. We fight with our hearts because that's all we've ever had." The Defiance fired everything it had at the command ship. The attack was completely uncoordinated, hitting random sections of the hull. It should have been ineffective. Instead, it crippled the massive vessel. The remaining Devourers fled toward the edge of the solar system. They had encountered something they couldn't consume, couldn't predict, couldn't defeat. For the first time in a million years, they were afraid, as the last enemy ship disappeared into the darkness between stars. The human fleet gathered around Earth. They had done the impossible. They had defeated an enemy that had consumed half the galaxy. Admiral Blake opened a communication channel to all the surviving alien species. "This is Admiral Susan Blake of Earth Defense Forces," she said. "The Devourers have been driven off. Earth's solar system is secure." The response came from Council Leader Zix, his voice filled with amazement. "How? How did you defeat them when our greatest civilizations could not?" Blake smiled. "Simple. We're not a great civilization. We're just humans from a dangerous little planet who don't know when to quit." Lieutenant Amy Foster landed her fighter on the Resilience, her squadron intact despite the impossible odds they had faced. As she climbed out of her cockpit, her ground crew chief ran up to her. "How did you do it?" he asked. "How did you fly through all that chaos and survive?" Amy shrugged. "Same way we've always survived. We adapted. We improvised. We refused to give up." She looked up at the stars where the Devourers had disappeared. "They made one big mistake. They thought being from a death world made us weak. They didn't realize it made us stronger." The Galactic Council offered humanity leadership of the rebuilt galaxy. They promised advanced technology, vast territories, and the respect humans had always deserved. Admiral Blake politely declined. "We appreciate the offer," she told the assembled alien leaders, "but we like being the wild cards. The galaxy needs someone who thinks differently. Someone who can solve problems that logic can't handle." She gestured toward Earth, still spinning peacefully in the background. "We'll help when you need us. We'll defend our friends and fight our enemies. But we're going to do it our way." Council Leader Zix nodded slowly. "Perhaps that is for the best. The galaxy has learned that sometimes the most primitive species can teach the most advanced lessons." Dr. Kevin Hayes was updating the ancient records with the story of humanity's victory. Future generations would read about the day the Deathworlders saved the galaxy by being exactly what everyone said they were. Chaotic, unpredictable, impossible to defeat. As he wrote, Kevin smiled. The Devourers had returned to the darkness between stars, carrying with them the memory of their first defeat in a million years. They would remember the species that fought with heart instead of logic. The species that turned their own dangerous world into a weapon. They would remember humans, and, in the depths of space, ancient hunger stirred uneasily. For the first time in eons, the Devourers knew fear. They had encountered something worse than any weapon or strategy. They had encountered hope. Stubborn, illogical, beautiful human hope that refused to die, no matter how dark things became. The galaxy was safe. Not because of superior technology or brilliant tactics, but because sometimes the best way to win is to be just crazy enough to try something that shouldn't work. Sometimes the best way to survive is to be from a world that's been trying to kill you your whole life. Sometimes the best way to save everyone is to never give up, even when giving up is the logical thing to do. The Devourers still feared the day Deathworlders finally took action, and now they knew why.